Are you a good person or merely a good citizen? It's a distinction many of us rarely ponder, often assuming the two are inherently intertwined, like two sides of the same civic coin, perpetually in harmony. We pride ourselves on abiding by the law, paying our taxes, respecting authority, and in doing so, we generally feel we're contributing positively, responsibly, and ethically to society. We often go through our lives with the comforting belief that what is legal is, by extension, also moral. But what happens when that comfortable alignment shatters? What happens when the institutions we trust, the systems we uphold, or even the nation we pledge allegiance to, ask you to compromise your deepest ethical convictions? What happens when legality demands a sacrifice of morality? Imagine for a moment a deeply unsettling scenario in your own contemporary life, not a distant historical event, but something that could unfold tomorrow. You're at work, striving to build a career, and your company, perhaps a respected corporation, a burgeoning startup, or even a non-profit organization, implements a new policy or embarks on a project. As you look closer, you realize that this initiative, while perfectly legal, is, deep down, something you know to be profoundly wrong. Perhaps it exploits a vulnerable population for profit, or it willfully disregards critical environmental protections, or subtly, insidiously, infringes upon human dignity or rights. Do you comply, maintaining your job, your financial stability, and your good standing within the corporate hierarchy, ensuring your family's security? Or do you speak out, risk challenging the status quo, potentially jeopardizing your livelihood, your reputation, and your very future within that organization? The stakes are undeniably high, the choice agonizing. Now broaden that perspective considerably. What if it's not just your employer, but your country itself? What if your government, through legislative decree or executive action, enacts a law or pursues a policy that fundamentally and unequivocally clashes with your most deeply held moral compass, a policy you believe is demonstrably unjust, inherently oppressive, discriminatory, or even cruel? Do you obey the law of the land, fulfilling what is conventionally understood as your duty as a citizen, perhaps rationalizing that one individual's dissent won't change anything, or that you must simply trust the system? Or do you follow the higher law of your conscience, that inner voice whispering that some things are simply wrong, regardless of their legality? Do you choose to stand firm, potentially becoming an outcast, a dissenter, or even, in the eyes of the state, an outlaw? This isn't merely some abstract philosophical exercise confined to dusty academic texts. It's a living, breathing, profound dilemma that has haunted individuals throughout history, forcing them to confront the very essence of their being and their place within the collective human experience. It is precisely this agonizing question that burned with an incandescent intensity at the heart of a remarkable man in 19th century America, Henry David Thoreau. He wasn't just a quiet naturalist, a gifted writer, or an astute philosopher. He was, first and foremost, a man of action, a man who refused to pay a poll tax he knew would directly fund an unjust war against Mexico and prop up the institution of slavery. He chose, instead, to spend a night in jail for his convictions, turning his personal act of defiance into a powerful, indelible statement. His quiet rebellion, his principled stand, was not just a personal protest. It was a spark that ignited a powerful intellectual fire, an idea so compelling, so resonant, that it would eventually echo across continents and inspire giants. His radical essay, written from the crucible of his own moral struggle, would become a foundational text for transformative social change. It would fuel the nonviolent resistance of Mahatma Gandhi in India's epic struggle for independence against British colonial rule, proving that moral force could overcome military might. Decades later, it would provide crucial intellectual and spiritual scaffolding for Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. in the American Civil Rights Movement, empowering millions to peacefully challenge deeply entrenched racial segregation and injustice. Their unwavering commitment to justice in the face of systemic, legally sanctioned injustice drew directly from Thoreau's foundational insights into the nature of duty, conscience, and individual liberty. So, as we embark on this intellectual and moral journey today, we are not just dissecting an old essay from a bygone era. We are grappling with a timeless, urgent inquiry that remains profoundly relevant in our hyper-connected, often turbulent modern society. What does it truly mean to be just in a world where the laws themselves might be unjust, where the state itself might be complicit in wrongdoing? How do we, as individuals, navigate the treacherous, often terrifying landscape where legality and morality diverge, where what is permissible clashes with what is truly right? When does our duty as a citizen, our obligation to the state end, and our more profound responsibility as a human being, our obligation to universal principles of justice and humanity, truly begin? Can one truly be a good person, living a life of integrity, if they are merely a compliant citizen in an unjust system, effectively sanctioning its wrongs through their silent obedience? These are the challenging, often uncomfortable, and deeply personal questions Thoreau compels us to confront, questions that resonate with startling, even unnerving, clarity even in our complex and often morally ambiguous modern world. Join us now as we dive deep into On the Duty of Civil Disobedience, not just as a historical document, but as one of the most powerful, thought-provoking, and revolutionary essays ever written on the absolute imperative of individual conscience, on the quiet, yet profound power of moral conviction. Prepare to have your assumptions challenged, your understanding of justice expanded, and perhaps to discover the quiet, unyielding power within yourself to stand resolutely for what is right, even when the world demands otherwise, even when it costs you. This isn't just history. It's a timeless blueprint for moral courage, a call to active conscience in any era. Have you ever looked at the world around you, at the news headlines, at the political landscape, and just felt overwhelmed? Like a tiny cog in a giant, sometimes broken machine, wondering if anything you do really matters? If so, then you, my friend, are exactly where I was when I first stumbled upon a slim, unassuming essay written over 170 years ago, an essay that completely reframed how I think about my own power, my own responsibility, and my place in the larger tapestry of society. The essay I'm talking about is Henry David Thoreau's On the Duty of Civil Disobedience. Now, before your eyes glaze over thinking this is going to be some dry, academic lecture, let me assure you it's anything but. This isn't just a historical document, it's a potent, living manifesto that continues to echo through the corridors of power and personal conviction even today. When I first picked this up, it wasn't out of academic curiosity. It was out of sheer frustration. I was feeling deeply powerless with the political climate, disheartened by decisions being made that felt fundamentally unjust, and utterly at a loss for how an individual could possibly make a difference. The typical advice vote, get involved, write your representatives felt like shouting into a hurricane. And then Thoreau's words hit me with the force of a revelation. They didn't just offer a different perspective. They offered a new framework for understanding my own role, for recognizing that even when the systems feel too big and too entrenched, our individual integrity and our conscience remain our most formidable tools. To truly appreciate the enduring power of Thoreau's ideas, it helps to briefly step back into his world. He wrote this essay in 1849, born directly from his experience of being jailed for refusing to pay a poll tax. Why did he refuse? Because that tax, in his eyes, supported two monumental injustices of his time: the expansionist and morally questionable Mexican-American War, and, even more critically, the abhorrent institution of slavery, a stain on the nation's soul. Thoreau, a New England transcendentalist, a philosopher, a naturalist, and a man deeply committed to living by his principles, could not, in good conscience, financially contribute to a government that actively perpetrated these wrongs. He believed that if a law or a government action compelled him to be an agent of injustice, then his higher duty was not to obey the law, but to follow the dictates of his own moral compass, an internal guide far superior to any external dictate. This wasn't some abstract intellectual exercise for him. It was a lived reality, a tangible act of resistance against what he saw as egregious violations of human rights and justice. And that's precisely why this text, despite its age, feels profoundly, almost shockingly, relevant in our own complex times. We too face moments where the lines between right and wrong feel blurred by political expediency, where the actions of our governments or corporations can leave us feeling complicit even when we disagree. So, this video isn't going to be a dusty book report or a historical dissection for its own sake. Think of it instead as a practical guide. It's an exploration of how Thoreau's core tenets, the supremacy of individual conscience, the power of nonviolent resistance, and the imperative to live with integrity, can be applied to our lives right now. How can we move from feeling helpless to finding our voice, our agency, and our capacity to act, not just despite the system, but within it and sometimes against it, in a way that truly matters? Throughout this series, we're going to dive deep into Thoreau's key arguments, breaking down the often dense language into accessible insights. First, we'll unpack the central idea of the individual conscience and its role in ethical governance. Then, we'll explore the practical implications of civil disobedience, examining what it actually means to refuse to cooperate with injustice and the various forms that can take. After that, we'll look at the ripple effect of Thoreau's work, tracing its influence from Gandhi to Martin Luther King Jr. and on to modern social movements. Finally, and perhaps most importantly, we'll bring it all back to you. How can these radical, yet deeply human, ideas empower you to live a more authentic, impactful life today? My hope is that by the end of this journey, you won't just understand a little more about a 19th century essay. You'll have a new lens through which to view your world, a renewed sense of purpose, and perhaps even a spark of courage to stand a little taller and act a little bolder in the face of what feels wrong. So, if you're ready to reconsider your role in shaping the world around you, let's begin. Our journey into Henry David Thoreau's profound essay on the duty of civil disobedience begins with a fundamental re-evaluation of how we perceive the very institution of government. Thoreau, with his characteristic clarity and unflinching moral compass, invites us to view the government not as an all-encompassing, immutable entity, but rather as a machine, a tool designed for a specific purpose. This central metaphor is surprisingly powerful and remains acutely relevant centuries later. Imagine a complex apparatus, gears turning, levers shifting, all engineered to perform a particular function. At its best, this machine of government operates smoothly and efficiently, facilitating the well-being of its citizens, protecting their rights, and enabling collective progress. It's a mechanism meant to serve, to implement the will of the people, and to provide the infrastructure for a flourishing society. When the machine is working well, it's almost invisible, a quiet hum in the background that simply gets the job done. It provides roads, ensures justice, and perhaps even fosters education and community. However, like any machine, the government is fallible. It can malfunction. It can become inefficient, clunky, and wasteful. Its gears can grind, its levers can stick, and its parts can wear out. But Thoreau pushes this metaphor further into a realm far more serious than mere inefficiency. He contends that this machine, when controlled by a select few, or when driven by selfish interests rather than principle, can actively work against justice. It can become an instrument of oppression, enforcing laws that are morally repugnant, prosecuting wars that are unjust, or upholding systems, like slavery in his own time, that fundamentally violate human dignity. In such instances, the machine isn't just broken, it's actively causing harm, crushing individuals and communities beneath its weight, rather than lifting them up. It's no longer a benevolent servant, but an oppressive master, its power turned towards malevolent ends. This leads us directly to one of Thoreau's most famous and oft-quoted pronouncements, that government is best which governs least. On the surface, this might sound like a call for anarchy, a complete dismantling of all governmental structures, but to interpret it as such would be to miss the nuanced depth of Thoreau's argument. He wasn't advocating for an absence of government, but for a government that is so effective, so just, and so perfectly aligned with the moral conscience of its people that its presence is felt minimally. In the 21st century, what might governs least truly signify? It doesn't necessarily mean cutting essential public services or dismantling social safety nets that protect the vulnerable. Rather, it speaks to a government that doesn't overreach, that respects individual liberties, privacy, and autonomy. It's a government that trusts its citizens to be capable, self-governing individuals, rather than needing constant surveillance or paternalistic control. It's a government free from excessive bureaucracy, corruption, and the undue influence of special interests. In essence, it's a machine that operates with such precision and moral clarity that it does precisely what is necessary and no more, allowing individuals and communities to thrive organically, guided by their own consciences and collaborative spirit. It means a government that doesn't drag its people into immoral wars or participate in surveillance programs that erode trust or create economic systems that disproportionately benefit a few at the expense of many. It is about a government whose primary strength lies not in its size or coercive power, but in its unwavering commitment to justice and its minimal, yet effective, interference in the lives of free people. So, what is our role when this machine, the government, runs unjustly? If the government is a machine designed to function, and it's instead grinding along a path of injustice, what is the duty of a conscientious individual? Thoreau provides a powerful answer: we must be the counter-friction. Think of a complex mechanism with a crucial gear that's stuck or a lever that's been jammed into the wrong position, causing the entire system to malfunction and inflict damage. The counter-friction is the force, however small, that is applied to that specific point of injustice to stop its operation. It's not about destroying the entire machine, but about interrupting its unjust function. When the machine of government is designed to carry out an injustice, such as enforcing an immoral law or funding an unjust war, the individual of conscience must step in and apply resistance. This resistance might manifest as refusing to pay taxes that fund the injustice, refusing to participate in the unjust act itself, or speaking out unequivocally against it. It is the sand in the gears of the unjust operation, the principled refusal to cooperate with evil, a deliberate slowing or halting of a process that is morally indefensible. The counter-friction is a conscious, deliberate act of moral intervention, a recognition that silent complicity makes one part of the problem. It is the courageous individual standing firm against the momentum of an unjust system. This brings us to the core of Thoreau's philosophy of individual responsibility, the fundamental distinction between being a man first and a subject afterward. This is perhaps the most revolutionary and enduring aspect of his argument. To be a man first means to recognize and prioritize your inherent humanity, your individual conscience, your moral compass, and your capacity for independent thought and action. Before you are defined by your nationality, your profession, or your legal obligations, you are a human being with an innate sense of right and wrong, a moral agent responsible for your own actions and inactions. Your highest allegiance, in this framework, is to your own conscience and to universal moral law. Only afterward do you become a subject and individual bound by the laws, customs, and expectations of the state or society. The implication is profound. Your identity as a subject is secondary and conditional. When the demands of the state conflict with the dictates of your conscience, when the government's machine runs counter to your internal moral compass, your duty as a man must take precedence. Your moral obligations supersede your legal ones. It means refusing to be a mere automaton, a cog in an unjust machine, simply because the law dictates it. It demands active moral discernment, a willingness to question authority, and the courage to act upon one's convictions, even when doing so incurs personal risk or societal disapproval. It is a powerful affirmation of individual moral autonomy and a call for us all to live lives not of passive obedience, but of active, principled conscience. We are not merely instruments of the state, we are its moral arbiters, its conscience. And when the state goes astray, it is our duty, as men and women first, to steer it back towards justice, even if it means becoming the counter-friction. Welcome back to our exploration of Henry David Thoreau's radical ideas. In this chapter, titled Your Conscience, the Only Vote That Truly Matters, we delve into the very heart of Thoreau's philosophy, the undeniable supremacy of individual conscience over the collective will of the majority, or indeed, over the law itself. For Thoreau, our primary obligation is not to uphold the legal framework of the state, but to abide by the unwavering dictates of our own moral compass. He asserts that we are, first and foremost, human beings endowed with reason and a sense of right and wrong, and only secondarily subjects of any government. This is a profound reorientation of civic duty. It suggests that if a law compels us to participate in or condone an injustice, Our allegiance must shift from the statute book to our inner voice, that irreducible core of personal integrity. Doing what we believe is right becomes paramount, even if it puts us at odds with what is legal. This brings us to a critical danger Thoreau identified: the undue respect for law. This isn't merely about respecting the democratic process or the order that laws ideally maintain. Instead, it speaks to a blind, unquestioning obedience that can be perilous. When we exhibit an undue respect for law, we essentially outsource our moral judgment. We defer our personal responsibility to discern right from wrong to an external authority, be it the government, the majority, or even tradition. In doing so, we risk becoming mere cogs in a machine, agents of injustice who, by simply following orders or abiding by the rules, facilitate actions that fundamentally violate our ethical convictions. This outsourcing transforms individuals from active, moral agents into passive instruments, disengaged from the consequences of collective action simply because it bears the stamp of legality. It's a subtle yet insidious erosion of personal autonomy and ethical fortitude, leading people to support systems they might privately disapprove of simply because it's the law. Thoreau takes this argument further, offering one of his most provocative statements: a minority of one, when armed with a righteous conscience, is a moral majority. This isn't hyperbole, it's a declaration of the inherent power of individual truth. Numbers, he argues, do not equate to moral legitimacy. 1,000,000 people can uphold an unjust system, but the single person who stands against it, guided by an unwavering sense of justice, embodies a truth more potent and morally weighty than the entire multitude. This concept elevates the individual from a mere participant in a democratic process to a sovereign moral judge whose internal conviction holds more sway than any ballot box when matters of fundamental right and wrong are at stake. It implies that true progress often begins with one person daring to dissent, to see beyond the prevailing norms, and to speak uncomfortable truths. To illustrate this in a modern, relatable context, consider a scenario involving a local community initiative. Imagine a food bank run by volunteers that receives donations. To streamline operations, the food bank institutes a strict rule: all incoming food must first be sorted, logged, and then distributed through official channels only, regardless of immediate need. This rule is designed for fairness and accountability across all recipients. However, one evening, a volunteer receives a call from a neighbor, a single parent in immediate, desperate need, whose child is genuinely hungry right now, and the official distribution is days away. The volunteer knows there are fresh, unpackaged provisions that have just come in, perfectly suitable and sitting ready, but not yet formally processed according to the rule. Here, the volunteer faces a classic Thoreauvian dilemma. The rule dictates waiting, following the official process, even if it means a child goes hungry for another night. Their conscience, however, screams for immediate action, for compassion, for prioritizing human need over bureaucratic procedure. The volunteer might choose to bypass the strict official channel, discreetly taking some of the unprocessed food to the hungry family. In doing so, they are technically violating the food bank's established rule, but they are aligning themselves with a higher moral obligation to alleviate immediate suffering. This act, though it might be a minority of one defying a community standard, embodies the very essence of Thoreau's argument. Their conscience, in that moment, casts the only vote that truly matters. It's a quiet, everyday act of civil disobedience, driven not by malice, but by a profound commitment to what is inherently right, even when it clashes with what is merely legal or procedural. Welcome back to our exploration of Henry David Thoreau's On the Duty of Civil Disobedience. We've discussed individual conscience and skepticism toward government. Now, in Chapter 3, The Power of Saying No, Redefining Disobedience, we reach the core, how an individual, armed with conviction, can challenge an unjust system. For many, disobedience conjures images of chaos or anarchy. But Thoreau's concept, civil disobedience, is different. It's not societal breakdown, violent insurrection, or a state of lawlessness. It's a principled, non-violent withdrawal of cooperation from an unjust system. It is a refusal to be an unwitting accomplice, a conscientious objection stemming from deep moral conviction, not a desire for chaos. It's a deliberate act of a moral agent saying, "I will not participate in what I believe is wrong." To grasp this, consider Thoreau's own life, specifically his act in the summer of 1846. America was embroiled in the Mexican-American War, a conflict Thoreau viewed as an immoral land grab, largely instigated to expand slavery. He found the state's actions repugnant, and knowing his taxes funded this very war, his conscience gnawed at him. For years, he had refused to pay the poll tax, a small annual sum. This wasn't tax evasion, but a profound statement he wouldn't financially support a government acting contrary to his highest moral principles. He couldn't, in good conscience, be an agent of its injustice. One day, walking into Concord, he was arrested and promptly jailed for his refusal. He spent but a single night there. A friend quietly paid the tax the next day against his explicit wishes. This brief incarceration, however, was profoundly transformative. Thoreau famously wrote that as he lay on his cot, gazing out through the bars, he felt an unexpected sense of freedom. It wasn't he who was truly imprisoned, he realized, but the state itself, trapped within its rigid laws and unjust policies. He felt more aligned with his true self inside those walls than outside, under a government he could not respect. This personal inconvenience became a powerful symbolic act, a testament to individual integrity. This brings us to a crucial distinction. True disobedience, for Thoreau, isn't merely complaining from the sidelines or intellectually disagreeing with policies. It's not simply sharing an angry post on social media or engaging in a heated debate. While these might spark discussion, they don't, in themselves, constitute civil disobedience. True disobedience demands a tangible personal stand. It requires putting your body, your reputation, your liberty, and sometimes even your livelihood on the line. It's about taking concrete action, however small, demonstrating an unequivocal refusal to cooperate with or support an unjust system. It is the personal embodiment of your moral conviction, refusing a tax, refusing to serve in an unjust war, or refusing to participate in a discriminatory practice. It is the brave act of aligning outward actions with inner conscience, regardless of the immediate personal cost. Herein lies the immense, often underestimated, power of non-participation. Thoreau recognized that any government's authority ultimately rests on the consent, whether active or passive, of the governed. If good people, principled individuals, simply stop participating in an unjust system, that system begins to lose its legitimacy, its functionality, and its very ability to operate. Imagine if every conscientious citizen refused to pay taxes funding a war they deemed immoral. Imagine if every person withdrew their labor, their consent, or their silence from a corrupt institution. Deprived of the cooperation it relies upon for its continued existence, the system would inevitably falter and collapse. Thoreau wasn't suggesting an armed uprising, which typically leads to more violence and instability. Instead, he proposed a peaceable revolution achieved not through bloodshed, but through the quiet, steadfast, collective refusal of complicity. His famous line, "If 1,000 men were not to pay their tax bills this year, that would not be a violent and bloody measure, as it would be to pay them, and enable the state to commit violence and shed innocent blood," perfectly encapsulates this idea. It's a profound shift in perspective. The real violence, the true injustice, is often perpetrated by the system when good people remain silent and cooperative. Non-cooperation, by contrast, becomes the truly non-violent and profoundly moral choice. This powerful concept, born from a solitary night in a Concord jail, did not remain an abstract philosophical musing. Instead, it laid the intellectual groundwork for some of the most impactful social and political movements of the 20th century. Half a world away, Mahatma Gandhi explicitly credited Thoreau as a significant influence on his philosophy of satyagraha, or truth force, which fueled India's non-violent struggle for independence from British rule. Gandhi's iconic Salt March, widespread boycotts, and unwavering campaigns of non-cooperation were direct, large-scale applications of Thoreau's principles, proving that the withdrawal of consent could indeed dismantle an empire. And across the Atlantic, in the fight for civil rights in America, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. likewise drew profound inspiration from both Thoreau and Gandhi. King's strategy of non-violent direct action, impactful sit-ins, transformative bus boycotts, powerful peaceful marches was a deliberate, strategic deployment of civil disobedience. These movements understood that by presenting a clear moral contrast, by bravely refusing unjust laws and non-violently accepting consequences, they could expose the system's inherent brutality and awaken the conscience of the wider public. A principled personal stand of one could inspire collective action, ultimately bending the arc of the moral universe towards justice. From the anti-apartheid movement in South Africa to environmental activism and countless other human rights struggles globally, the resonant spirit of Thoreau's civil disobedience echoes. It testifies to the enduring, transformative power of individuals to challenge the status quo, not through destruction, but through principled refusal, through the quiet, yet thunderous power of saying no to injustice. It reminds us that true change often begins not with a violent roar, but with a deliberate, conscientious withdrawal of cooperation, a personal act of integrity that becomes the foundational stone for a more just world. It's not always about immediate, resounding success, but about planting a vital seed, fundamentally shifting the moral landscape, and demonstrating that loyalty to one's own conscience is absolutely paramount. Welcome back to our exploration of Henry David Thoreau's radical ideas. In this chapter, titled "Are Your Taxes Paying for Things You Hate?", we dive into one of Thoreau's most practical, yet profoundly controversial, arguments: the direct link between our money, specifically our taxes, and the state-sponsored injustices they enable. It's a challenge to our financial complicity, a call to examine where our economic footprint truly leads. Thoreau's logic, born from his principled refusal to pay a poll tax, was disarmingly simple, yet devastatingly impactful. For him, money was not just currency, it was a conduit for power, a direct line of support to the government's machinery. When that machinery was engaged in actions he deemed morally repugnant, specifically supporting slavery and waging the Mexican-American War, Thoreau believed that contributing financially made him an active participant, a silent enabler. He saw his tax dollar not as an impersonal civic duty, but as a drop of his own conscience, staining him with complicity in acts he vehemently opposed. He famously stated, "If I devote myself to other pursuits and contemplations, I must first see, at least, that I do not pursue them sitting upon another man's shoulders." For Thoreau, paying taxes to an unjust government was akin to lending one's strength, however small, to the very hands that committed injustice. It was a moral entanglement he simply could not abide. To pay was to sanction, to pay was to participate in the wrongdoing. Now let's fast forward to our modern world. While few of us are directly asked to fund specific wars or institutions in the way Thoreau was, his core principle resonates powerfully in discussions about voting with your wallet and ethical consumerism. In an economy increasingly driven by global corporations and complex supply chains, we are constantly faced with choices that, however indirectly, support various systems and practices. Every purchase, every investment, every service we subscribe to is a small endorsement. Do we buy products from companies known for exploiting labor or damaging the environment? Do our bank accounts fund industries we find morally questionable? Are our retirement savings invested in corporations whose practices conflict with our values? Just as Thoreau saw his tax money as a direct contribution to governmental actions, we are increasingly aware that our consumer choices, collectively, shape markets and signal our tacit approval or disapproval. It's a recognition that our economic power extends far beyond the ballot box, influencing everything from corporate ethics to national policy through the aggregate of our financial decisions. This leads us to the difficult, often uncomfortable question: how can we, as individuals, practically reduce our financial complicity in systems we oppose? Thoreau's direct refusal of taxes, while powerful in its symbolism, carried significant personal risk and is not a universally feasible or advisable strategy for everyone. So, what are the alternatives? It begins with awareness and intentionality. It might involve boycotting certain products or brands, choosing to support local businesses or those with transparent ethical practices, or even divesting from investments in industries that clash with our conscience, such as fossil fuels, weapons manufacturers, or companies with poor human rights records. It can also extend to how we engage with taxes themselves, advocating for more transparent government spending, supporting political candidates who champion responsible fiscal policies, or actively engaging in public discourse about how our collective resources are utilized. The goal isn't necessarily complete purity, an almost impossible feat in our interconnected world, but rather a conscious effort to align our financial flows with our deeply held moral convictions. Of course, we must acknowledge the complexities inherent in this pursuit. Taxes fund essential public services that we all benefit from roads and schools to healthcare and public safety. Completely opting out often isn't practical, nor does it guarantee a better outcome. There's a subtle but significant distinction between passively benefiting from a system and actively endorsing its harmful components. Yet, even with these complexities, Thoreau's message remains potent. It emphasizes the profound power of conscious financial choices. Each decision we make with our money, however small, is a statement. It's an opportunity to exercise our individual agency, to refuse to be mere cogs in a machine we despise, and instead to actively sculpt a world that aligns more closely with our values. It's a continuous, often challenging, journey of ethical navigation, demanding reflection, research, and courage. But in this journey lies the heart of civil disobedience, the unwavering commitment to live in integrity, even when the world around us makes it difficult. Welcome back to our exploration of Henry David Thoreau's radical ideas. We've delved into individual conscience and the moral imperative to resist unjust government. Now we arrive at perhaps the most counterintuitive, yet liberating, chapter 5, Why Prison Can Be the Freest Place on Earth. This title is a paradox, challenging our understanding of punishment and freedom. For Thoreau, imprisonment for a just cause was not shame, but an emblem of honor, a testament to true moral freedom. Let's recount Thoreau's surprisingly positive and insightful experience during his single night in jail. In 1846, as a staunch abolitionist and opponent of the Mexican-American War, he had refused to pay his poll tax for years, withholding support from a government he deemed corrupt and complicit in slavery. Arrested on a mundane errand, what might have been a humiliating ordeal became, for Thoreau, a philosophical experiment. He viewed his cell as if it were a new room, observing plaster, gratings, and inmates with naturalist's curiosity. Far from confined, he felt liberated. The walls, he realized, confined only his body, not his mind or spirit. He felt freer, more himself, inside those walls than often walking Concord streets, surrounded by neighbors who tacitly supported injustice. He conversed with a cellmate, gleaning insights into society's underbelly, and watched his hometown from a new, detached perspective. The brief experience was profoundly affirming. He was released the next morning, to his slight annoyance, when an anonymous friend paid his tax, inadvertently cutting short his fascinating social experiment. This brief incarceration solidified a profound statement: under a government which imprisons any unjustly, the true place for a just man is also a prison. This is a moral imperative, not poetic flourish. Thoreau argues that when the state acts unjustly through war, slavery, or oppression, a moral individual cannot, in good conscience, support it. To maintain integrity often requires non-cooperation, which the state sees as defiance. When the state imprisons justly, it reveals its own moral bankruptcy. By willingly entering that prison, the just person exposes the state's hypocrisy. The prison cell transforms from punishment to protest, a stage where moral truth confronts power. It becomes a space where actions align with principles, contrasting with outside compromise. For Thoreau, confinement isn't a loss of freedom, but a profound assertion of it, a refusal to be bought or silenced. The true shame, he implies, lies not in being imprisoned for justice, but in being free while injustice reigns. This brings us to the crucial distinction between physical confinement and spiritual or intellectual freedom. Thoreau asserted that the body's imprisonment has no bearing on the soul's liberation. True freedom, he understood, resides not externally, but within individual conscience and intellect. Jail walls limit movement, but cannot restrict thought, moral judgment, or commitment to truth. In fact, for Thoreau, physical confinement could sharpen intellectual clarity, providing untainted reflection. While his body was behind bars, his mind was free to roam, analyze, and critique the system. He was physically isolated, yet spiritually and morally connected to a higher law of justice. Conversely, those outside, seemingly free, who conformed and paid taxes, were, in Thoreau's view, often more profoundly imprisoned, shackled by fear, material attachments, and unquestioning obedience. Their minds weren't truly free, their spirits were compromised. Thoreau taught that the most dangerous chains are unseen, forged through moral cowardice and intellectual complacency. This revolutionary idea that prison could be a site of honor and freedom profoundly empowered future activists to face imprisonment without fear, even embracing it as a potent weapon. Mahatma Gandhi, leading India to independence through non-violent resistance, read Thoreau's Civil Disobedience in a South African prison. Thoreau's philosophy deeply influenced Gandhi's Satyagraha truth force, where non-violent defiance and willing acceptance of suffering, including imprisonment, exposed injustice. For Gandhi, jail became a badge of honor, a symbol of unwavering commitment, and a public demonstration of unjust British rule. Similarly, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., a towering figure in the American civil rights movement, explicitly cited Thoreau. King's letter from Birmingham jail, written while incarcerated for protesting segregation, echoed Thoreau's arguments. King asserted the moral duty to disobey unjust laws, declaring direct action and willingness to go to jail essential to awaken the nation's conscience. For King and civil rights activists, imprisonment was not an endpoint but a powerful step, amplifying their message and revealing racial injustice. They entered jails not as criminals, but moral crusaders, transforming subjugation into pulpits of truth. This legacy inspires movements worldwide, demonstrating true power lies not in the capacity to imprison, but in the unwavering spirit of those refusing moral enslavement. So, Thoreau's night in jail wasn't an inconvenience, it was a revelation. It provided living proof of his radical theory: the most constrained physical space can paradoxically become the domain of ultimate moral and intellectual freedom. It taught that when the state acts unjustly, the true measure of a free person isn't avoiding prison, but willingness to enter it for conscience. It turned punishment on its head, reframing incarceration for a just cause as profound self-liberation and a powerful catalyst for change. We've explored the direct challenge of civil disobedience, the deliberate act of withdrawing consent from an unjust government. But for Thoreau, this wasn't an isolated tactic, it was merely one manifestation of a far grander philosophy, a way of living that he explored more deeply in his seminal work, Walden. The man who spent a night in jail for refusing a poll tax was the very same man who retreated to a simple cabin by a pond, seeking to live deliberately to confront only the essential facts of life and see if he could not learn what they had to teach. These two seemingly disparate acts, one a sharp political declaration, the other a serene personal experiment, are in fact two profoundly intertwined sides of the same coin, united by Thoreau's unwavering commitment to individual sovereignty and conscious living. Both were rigorous experiments in self-reliance, each challenging the prevailing norms of conformity and quiet desperation that he observed in his society. While civil disobedience articulated the fundamental right and indeed the moral duty to resist an external imposition that violated one's conscience, Walden meticulously demonstrated the internal architecture of a life lived free from such systemic dependence, a life sculpted from a place of principle rather than mere reaction to external pressures. They are a dual manifesto for individual liberation, inside and out. This brings us to a profound, perhaps even radical, insight for Thoreau. The ultimate form of protest isn't always a dramatic confrontation with the state, but rather the quiet, persistent act of living a life that doesn't depend on the very systems you critique. Consider the vulnerability of one whose entire existence, their home, their livelihood, their sense of self-worth is inextricably woven into the fabric of a potentially corrupt or unjust establishment. How can one truly stand against an unjust war or a system built on exploitation if your very bread and butter are contingent upon its smooth operation? Your ability to dissent becomes inherently compromised, softened by the fear of losing everything. Thoreau understood, with crystalline clarity, that economic entanglement often leads directly to moral compromise. By radically simplifying his needs, by stepping away from the endless, soul-consuming chase for material wealth that preoccupied his neighbors, he gained a crucial existential freedom, the freedom to say no unequivocally and without fear of personal ruin. His brief stay in jail for tax evasion was only brief because he wasn't heavily invested in the material world that the state could easily seize or control. He wasn't tied down by mortgages, by demanding careers that compromised his time and spirit, or by the insatiable expectations of consumer culture. This hard-won independence wasn't about isolating himself from humanity. It was about cultivating a position of inner and outer strength from which to speak truth to power, to act on conviction, unbound by the chains of worldly attachment. So, how does one achieve this powerful, liberated position? Thoreau's answer is found in the relentless, uncompromising pursuit of simplicity. By deliberately reducing our material needs and desires, by stripping away the superfluous, we simultaneously reduce our dependence on the complex economic and governmental machinery that often supports injustice, even unknowingly. Every unnecessary possession, every gratuitous luxury we accumulate, every unexamined desire for more, potentially binds us tighter to the very systems we might wish to challenge or change. When we simplify our lives, we discover a liberating truth. We need less money, which means we need less soul-crushing labor, which in turn frees up invaluable time, mental energy, and spiritual space. This newfound freedom isn't merely for leisure. It's the freedom to think clearly, to examine our consciences without distraction, and crucially, to act on our deeply held principles without the overwhelming fear of financial collapse, social ostracism, or personal inconvenience. It's the freedom to stand up for what is right, even if it comes at a personal cost, because that cost has been dramatically reduced and made bearable. It is through this radical simplification that we regain true agency over our own lives, transforming ourselves from passive cogs in a vast, indifferent machine into self-determining, principled individuals, capable of genuine moral action and embodying the change we wish to see. It's crucially important to clarify that Thoreau's philosophy is not about living a life of constant opposition or becoming a perpetual contrarian whose sole purpose is to pick fights. His goal was far more fundamental and deeply personal: to live a life of authentic integrity, a life where one's inner convictions align seamlessly with one's outer actions. Civil disobedience, or any act of resistance for that matter, is not the end in itself, but a necessary means to an end: the creation and maintenance of a life where truth, justice, and personal conscience are paramount. The true aim is not to be against everything, but to be for truth, for justice, and above all, for the authentic self that resonates with these ideals. When society's demands, its laws, or its unthinking traditions clash irreconcilably with our deepest ethical sense, the act of disobedience becomes not just a political statement, but a profound and necessary expression of that integrity. But the ultimate triumph is not the protest itself, but the life that is lived beyond it, a life so rooted in principle, so stripped of inessential dependencies, so transparent in its purpose, that it naturally resists corruption and stands as a vibrant beacon of individual truth. This is the revolution that begins within, the slow, deliberate cultivation of a self that is robust enough to withstand external pressures and true enough to its own nature to contribute to a more just and humane world, not necessarily through constant conflict, but through unwavering authenticity and a steadfast commitment to one's highest ideals. Thoreau ultimately teaches us that the path to a more just and free society isn't solely paved with grand political movements, but with the cumulative weight of individuals choosing, day after day, to live deliberately, simply, and with unwavering integrity. The revolution starts not always in the tumultuous streets or the halls of power, but in the quiet resolve of a single conscience, in the mindful choices we make daily about how we earn our living, what we consume, and what we truly value. It is the profound realization that the most powerful statement you can make, the most impactful form of civil disobedience, is simply to live your truth, unburdened by convention and unafraid of judgment. This is the freedom that Thoreau champions, the freedom that can transform both individual lives and, eventually, the world itself. Now, we've journeyed through Thoreau's On the Duty of Civil Disobedience, exploring his profound call for individual conscience and deliberate living. But how do we bridge the gap between these powerful theories and the practical realities of our everyday lives? It can feel overwhelming. Yet, Thoreau himself lived his principles, making choices day by day. So let's move beyond the abstract and embrace a tangible, actionable path forward. I've designed a simple, impactful 7-day plan, not to overhaul your existence in a week, but to integrate Thoreau's core ideas into your own life in small, meaningful increments. Consider it a personal experiment, an invitation to lead a more examined and principled life. For your first 2 days, days 1 and 2, your mission is to observe and question. This foundational step is about sharpening your awareness of the systems, rules, and unspoken agreements that shape your daily existence. Identify just one law or social norm you follow without conscious thought. It might be something seemingly innocuous, like how you queue, a specific brand you always buy, or a social expectation you adhere to. Once identified, the crucial step is to ask yourself, does this truly align with my personal conscience? Is this a principle I actively endorse, or merely a habit born of convenience or unexamined societal pressure? This isn't an immediate call to rebellion, it's an initiation of an internal dialogue, understanding the often invisible threads that guide your behavior and shape your consent. Moving into days 3 and 4, we shift our focus to conscious consumption. Thoreau understood the immense power of economic choices as direct expressions of our values. For these 2 days, select just one specific purchase you are contemplating or have recently made, from your daily coffee to a new gadget. Before or after, commit to tracing its journey. Ask yourself, where did this item truly come from? Who made it and under what conditions? What resources were utilized? The pivotal question becomes, am I, through this financial transaction, inadvertently supporting something that fundamentally conflicts with my ethical principles? Perhaps it's a company known for exploitative labor practices, an industry with a significant environmental footprint, or a product whose message you disagree with. The objective isn't to dramatically alter your entire spending habit overnight, but to awaken a deeper awareness of the ethical and societal implications embedded within your consumer choices. It's about consciously exercising your economic vote with greater intention. Day 5 is dedicated to voice your principle. This is where your internal reflections begin to manifest externally. Choose one principle that has resonated most deeply with you throughout the week, perhaps a concern sparked during your observation days, or an ethical dilemma highlighted by your consumption experiment. Then, actively seek a thoughtful, constructive way to express it. This doesn't require grand gestures. It could be composing a polite but firm email to a local representative about a policy you believe requires re-evaluation. It might involve crafting a well-reasoned and respectful argument to post on a social media platform, inviting thoughtful discussion. Or, perhaps most profoundly challenging, it could mean having a difficult but honest and open conversation with a trusted friend or family member about a belief you hold strongly. The central emphasis here is on clarity, respectful articulation, and cultivating the quiet courage to share your individual conscience within your chosen public sphere, however modest that sphere may initially seem. Finally, for days 6 and 7, we arrive at the heart of Thoreau's philosophy: live deliberately. This is the culmination of your week-long personal experiment, an opportunity to implement a tangible, conscious change in your life aimed at achieving greater personal freedom and autonomy. Identify just one specific area in your life where you can actively simplify, where you can consciously choose to reduce your reliance on complex, often draining systems or unnecessary material possessions. This might translate into decluttering a specific space, canceling a subscription service you rarely utilize, committing to a digital detox for an entire day, or choosing to walk or cycle for a short journey instead of driving. The fundamental aim here is not about self-deprivation, but profoundly about liberation. By consciously simplifying, you deliberately create invaluable space for quiet contemplation, space for genuine human connection, and crucial space to reclaim a degree of self-direction and autonomy from the often overwhelming demands of a system that frequently prioritizes accumulation and conformity over consciousness and individual well-being. This 7-day plan is presented merely as a foundational blueprint, a series of gentle yet potent invitations to observe more closely, to think more deeply, and ultimately to act with greater intention and integrity. Thoreau's enduring legacy isn't about completely abandoning society, but rather about engaging with it on your own terms, consistently guided by an awakened and robust individual conscience. Take these thoughtfully designed steps, reflect deeply on the experiences and insights you gain, and allow yourself to discover how even the smallest, most deliberate acts of living can profoundly reshape your relationship with the world around you and with yourself. Your personal journey towards civil disobedience, or perhaps more aptly described as civil obedience to the highest dictates of your inner self, truly begins now. Welcome back. We've explored Henry David Thoreau's radical ideas on conscience, justice, and the individual's role in society. Now, To conclude, let's distill the essence of On the Duty of Civil Disobedience into 3 powerful, actionable principles: the Thoreau Code. These are timeless calls to integrity designed to be memorable, tweet-able, and transformative. Our first rule, the cornerstone of Thoreau's philosophy: your conscience is your compass. Let it guide you, even when it conflicts with the law or the crowd. This principle demands we look inward, trusting our deepest moral convictions above all external authorities. Thoreau saw law as a human construct, imperfect and often unjust. Conscience, he believed, was a direct line to truth, a divine spark, an unerring moral guide. To betray your conscience for Thoreau was to betray your very soul, becoming a mere instrument of the state. How often do we abdicate moral responsibility saying, "I was just following orders," or "it's the law"? Thoreau challenges us to reject this. He asks for courage to stand alone, articulate dissent, and act upon your internal sense of right and wrong, even when facing societal disapproval or legal penalties. It's about personal sovereignty, recognizing the most dangerous chains are often forged through quiet complicity. This isn't anarchy, but a profound demand for individual integrity amidst collective moral failings. True justice doesn't emanate solely from statutes, but from the unyielding moral compass within each of us. This rule applies to grand acts of defiance and small daily choices alike. Your conscience, truly, is your ultimate arbiter. Moving to our second core principle in action is action. Refusing to participate in injustice is one of the most powerful things you can do. Many believe that if we aren't actively perpetrating harm, we are blameless. Thoreau vehemently disagreed. For him, inaction in the face of injustice wasn't neutrality, it was complicity. When a government acts immorally, waging an unjust war or upholding slavery, and you support it through taxes, votes, or silent acquiescence, you are participating. You lend tacit approval, resources, your very being to that wrong. Thoreau's own civil disobedience, refusing his poll tax, was about withdrawing consent, severing personal connection to a corrupt system. This is a profound shift. It empowers the individual not by demanding they overthrow a system, but by demonstrating they can withhold the legitimacy and resources that system relies upon. Collective non-participation can grind an unjust machine to a halt. It's the quiet strike, the refusal to cooperate, the peaceful boycott of oppression. This principle compels us to examine our daily lives. Where are we unintentionally supporting systems against our values? Are we buying from unethical companies? Silent when we should speak? Thoreau teaches us that sometimes the most revolutionary act is simply to say no, to detach from complicity, to stop enabling the structures we decry. Finally, a practical and liberating strategy, rooted in Thoreau's life at Walden Pond Live, simply to live freely. The less you need from the system, the more power you have to challenge it. This isn't just a lifestyle choice, it's a political strategy. Thoreau understood that dependence on material possessions, societal approval, or existing comforts constrains our ability to speak truth to power. If your livelihood, status, and security are tied to the system, how freely can you criticize it? How readily withdraw participation? Fear of losing everything keeps many compliant. By simplifying his life, minimizing needs and wants, Thoreau achieved radical independence. He wasn't beholden to a hated job, debts, or stifling social expectations. This gave him freedom to think clearly, observe deeply, and act on convictions without fear of severe personal reprisal. In our modern consumer world, This rule is perhaps more relevant than ever. We're constantly bombarded with messages saying we need more. Thoreau reminds us true wealth lies in independence, in the mental and moral space to be fully ourselves. By consciously reducing our material footprint, questioning true needs versus societal wants, we cultivate resilience. We build a personal fortress of self-reliance, allowing us to challenge the status quo, withdraw consent, and truly let conscience be our guide without economic vulnerability. It is the bedrock upon which the other two principles can effectively stand. These three rules: your conscience is your compass, inaction is action, and live simply to live freely, form the Thoreau Code. They are a blueprint for integrity, moral courage, and genuine freedom in a complex world. They invite us to awaken, to question, and to act. We've journeyed deep into the mind of Henry David Thoreau, a man whose ideas, penned over a century and a half ago, resonate with startling clarity and urgency in our modern world. He challenged us, not merely to observe passively, but to participate actively and consciously in the grand experiment of human society. His iconic words, "Let your life be a counterfriction to stop the machine," are not just a historical echo. They are a direct, potent invitation to each of us, here and now, in the very fabric of our contemporary existence. But what does it truly signify to be the counter-friction today? It's not always about grand public protests, though such collective actions are undeniably vital. Often in our daily lives, it's a far more subtle, yet profoundly powerful, act of individual will and moral courage. It's the conscious moment you choose integrity over expediency, empathy over indifference, critical thought over unthinking acceptance. It's the deliberate decision to question prevailing narratives, to seek truth beyond the superficial, to stand up for a principle when the path of least resistance would be to remain silent. It's the gentle but firm resistance against injustice, apathy, or the relentless, unthinking consumption that permeates so much of our modern daily lives. Consider the machines of our present era. They manifest in myriad forms: the overwhelming tides of misinformation flooding digital spaces, the insidious pressures of a consumer culture, systemic inequalities that persist, often unseen, or even the subtle erosion of our collective capacity for critical thought in a world obsessed with instant gratification. To be a counter-friction in this complex landscape is to intentionally inject intention, conscience, and your individual moral authority into these vast, often impersonal systems. It's to subtly slow them down, to challenge their momentum, to compel them to operate with a greater awareness of their human impact. It's about choosing to engage thoughtfully with the world, to speak truthfully, and to act ethically even when that path is less trodden or more challenging. Thoreau understood with piercing clarity that meaningful, enduring change often begins with the individual, with those small, deliberate choices that, over time, accumulate into something unstoppable. Each act of conscience, no matter how minor it might seem, sends a ripple through the collective. It serves as a quiet yet resolute testament to the inherent power of one, echoing outwards to inspire others. It's a powerful declaration that you are not merely a passive cog in an indifferent machine, but a conscious, moral agent capable of shaping its direction, however incrementally. So, as we bring our deep dive into Thoreau's defiant wisdom to a close, I extend a personal invitation to you. Consider this profound question, not just intellectually, but with honest introspection. What is one small, deliberate way you can choose to be the counter-friction this week? It might be offering a well-reasoned perspective in a challenging conversation, researching an important issue more deeply, making a conscious, ethical purchasing decision, or simply taking a quiet moment to reflect on your own core values before reacting to the world around you. I genuinely encourage you to think about that one small action, that intentional choice, and then share it in the comments below. Your idea, however modest, holds the potential to spark inspiration in someone else. This digital space isn't just for sharing, it's designed for genuine connection and collective empowerment. I urge you to read through each other's ideas, offer support, engage in thoughtful discussion, and actively build upon the collective wisdom and moral courage you discover there. Because this truly is the crucible where movements begin, not with isolated individuals, but with a vibrant community of conscious agents, recognizing their shared values, amplifying their individual friction, and channeling it into a potent, collective force against the status quo. It's in this shared dialogue, this mutual encouragement, that individual sparks can ignite a transformative fire. If this exploration of Thoreau's enduring message has sparked a new thought, challenged a preconception, or inspired a renewed commitment to conscientious living, please consider showing your support. Like this video if it made you think, if it resonated with that part of you that yearns for a more just, thoughtful, and equitable world. And if you're keen to continue these deep dives into life-changing ideas, into the philosophies that shape our understanding of ourselves, our society, and our place within it, then please subscribe to the channel. Join our growing community dedicated to fostering critical thinking, meaningful dialogue, and inspiring informed, impactful action. To truly grasp the full depth, power, and nuanced brilliance of Thoreau's argument, to immerse yourself in the compelling force of his original prose, I cannot recommend highly enough reading on the duty of civil disobedience in its entirety. It is a seminal work, foundational to our understanding of individual liberty, moral responsibility, and the duties of citizenship. The excellent news is, in true spirit of accessibility and intellectual freedom, the full text of Civil Disobedience is freely available online. I've placed a direct link in the description below. Take the time, read it, wrestle with its revolutionary ideas, and allow its powerful call to conscience to guide your own journey. Remember, the call to civil disobedience, as Thoreau articulated it, is not a call to chaos or anarchy. It is a profound call to conscious order, to a higher form of citizenship rooted in an unyielding commitment to justice, truth, and moral principle. It's an enduring reminder that true freedom and progress lie not in passive obedience, but in the courageous exercise of our moral imagination and individual will. So go forth, armed with Thoreau's wisdom and your own awakened conscience, and be the counter-friction the world so desperately needs. Make your life count. Make your conscience heard. The machine can be stopped, or at least redirected, one deliberate, thoughtful act at a time.